10 Nation, it is day 23. It's not day 23, it's actually day 47. We got 23 days to go, and that's really what I wanted to say. We are officially into the last third of the challenge. Okay, arguably the part of the challenge where you will make the most change, where you should see the most change. So I'm going to really encourage you to keep going, to be relentless, and go hard over these next, really we're talking about 3 weeks and a bit here, okay? All right, there is a really great question that somebody asked me, and so I will read it to you. And it goes like this. It's a short question, but it's a long answer, because it's just really not all that simple. Well, I want to dive into it. Managing cravings for sweet slash sugar. Is it psychological, or is my body trying to tell me something? Okay, so this could be a bit of both. So I can give you, for example, I've already talked about this. I could give you the, if you want to call it, neurological kind of aspect of this, which it's hard to say which would be more likely, but I'll wait till I explain everything to you here. Obviously, if you've been watching the videos, you know that I talked about serotonin competing essentially with the stress hormone cortisol, right? And how they both compete for the underlying building blocks, and how one can take away from the other. And serotonin is really what we need to kind of feel good, to feel relaxed. Okay, so a great way to blunt cortisol and help the increase of serotonin is by eating sugar. So I think that what happens often when people are stressed out is they crave sugar. Well, I don't think that that's what happens, but I think the reason for that is exactly what I'm talking about. It's that building block tryptophan that is essentially being eaten up by cortisol and cannot facilitate serotonin production, right? This is often why people go towards sugar and alcohol and other things for comfort, because we do actually get a comfort out of it. And whether you want to, I don't want to say admit it, but realize it or not, it is our physiology. And so you may not be aware of it. It's probably stronger in you than you think. Okay? Especially if you are somebody that regularly drinks. Okay, so now let's talk about a little bit about some hormones that will affect your hunger. Okay, we've got effectively really the two major ones are ghrelin and leptin. Okay, now essentially these are hormones that are released by your fat cells. So, when we're talking about ghrelin, we're talking about the hunger hormone, the hormone that's responsible for creating that need to eat. And we talk about leptin, it's got the opposite effect. It's that giving you that full effect, okay? So when you have low body fat levels, or you've got an empty stomach, ghrelin will be released. But if you have a lot of sugary foods on a regular basis, we also see that there's this overproduction of ghrelin. So it's kind of interesting. It almost spurs you to eat more and more and more when you're eating, especially these highly processed sugary foods. And I say highly processed because you're not really in nature going to find a food that's very low nutrient value and very high in sugar. I guess you'd have to point it out to me. You're not going to find things like soft drinks in nature, right? But these are outlets that where you can get a lot of sugar in a very condensed volume, right? So and of course you've heard me say this before, you want to eat protein every meal, because this is going to help to reduce ghrelin. Okay, when it comes to leptin, now we see actually leptin resistance, especially among obese people, which is very interesting. So obese people never feeling full, and this can sometimes happen by chronically elevated insulin levels. And this can happen as a result of eating too many carbohydrates, okay? Really, I don't want to bash carbohydrates here. But it's really, because it's not like we're talking about yams and, you know, fruit here. We're talking about the processed junk food that, you know, is just all too common and cheap and available readily everywhere, at least in North America. And you know, this has really, really not helped us. You know, the best thing people could have been doing is going towards a source of protein or something like that to avoid this type of thing. But, you know, getting back to the point, we see these chronically elevated insulin levels, right? Insulin is what is responsible for getting rid of sugar out of your bloodstream. But what happens is when you are constantly having high amounts of carbohydrates, your cells become less receptive to that insulin, and your body's constantly pumping it out. And this is going to increase more inflammation all throughout the body. And this is going to lead to leptin resistance. So it's like a big vicious cycle. So again, you want to avoid things like sugary drinks. You want to, or any sugary foods for that matter, okay? Very sugary dense foods. I say sugary dense or sugary drinks because those are probably the worst culprits. They're pop and stuff like that is just nothing but sugar and water. That's it, you know. And it's more acidic, obviously. You want to eat things like or foods that will help you with anti-inflammatory means like fish, okay, like salmon, okay. It's the omega-3s that will help to reduce that inflammation. You want to exercise regularly. This will help to reduce insulin levels in the bloodstream. And you can also supplement with alpha-lipoic acid and fish oil. Okay, so I kind of, you know, went off a bit on this, but to this person that's asked me this question, I would say that's probably because you're actually very lean. That's probably why you're craving it. When your fat cells get small enough, your body will produce more ghrelin. Okay, so you're gonna feel hungrier. Every time when I get ready for a bodybuilding show, my hunger is just, I can't explain to you the hunger that you can have when you're 5% body fat. I can't, it's not like being hungry. It's not like just not eating for 12 hours or 16 hours and feeling hungry. It's just a hunger that you cannot explain. And part of that is just because the fat cells on the body have just shrunk to nothing. And ghrelin's being produced like crazy. So hunger is elevated like you wouldn't believe. And you know, your body has a set point with that body fat level. It's going to want to elevate that body fat level to a certain point. And I've also obviously been at the point where my body fat levels were too high, and I remember just thinking or feeling like I'm just not hungry at all. And of course my body was producing more leptin. Is trying to find that set point that we all have. We all have a certain set point, sort of a reasonable area where you will sort of best function at. Okay. But again, this can be manipulated by the types of foods we eat, okay? So we want to really avoid, the quote bad carbs, okay? We don't want to avoid carbs, we want to avoid the bad carbs. Essentially, we want to avoid the processed foods, okay? And like I said, quite often the processed foods obviously don't, it's not all processed foods that are bad, okay? It's really what we're talking about here are high sugary dense foods, okay? That's what we want to avoid to help us with this type of issue, okay? Which I think a lot of people have. Maybe not so much in Canada, but in the United States where there's over 50% obesity, and like that's like their number one, that is their number one disease. Well, I say it's a disease. It is a disease, but the problem with that is it encompasses so many other things along with it, right? So many other things like blood pressure problems and type 2 diabetes, etc. So you're just going to hear me say it, right? We got to exercise. We need to make sure that we have an adequate amount of protein in our diets, and we want to be eating real whole food for the large majority of our food intake, okay? Okay, message of the day. What is my message of the day? My message of the day is compare what you want with what you actually do. Compare what you want with what you actually do. And this is really, really important because, you know, we often say that we want certain things, but then our actions don't necessarily, you know, reflect it. And, you know, sometimes it's a hard thing to accept because perhaps emotionally you feel like you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing, and maybe you are. Maybe your body's just resistant, but I highly doubt it. It's usually the fact that people are just not doing what they're supposed to do. But putting that aside, whether you're doing what you're supposed to do or not doing, the point is what you're doing isn't working. Okay? So you always need to reevaluate what you're doing. And part of reevaluating what you're doing is having an accurate record of what that is that you are doing, okay? And this is not an accurate record. And this is not an accurate record, okay? You can't go by how you feel, and you can't go by how your memory will be skewed. 100% your memory will be skewed. You should journal everything, your workouts, your cardio, and everything you eat. 100%, okay? That's the only way you're gonna know. Then you can see it. And let's not forget our NEAT, okay? Our non-exercise activity thermogenesis. What we're doing throughout the day, you know, just give yourself a rating during the day of where you lie on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of your just general activity that you do about the day, right? Are you sitting around most of the day, or are you getting up and moving around? Okay, this all matters and makes a huge difference. It can make, honestly, it can make a difference of like 400 or 500 calories. Imagine that every single day. That's huge difference, huge, huge, huge. Okay, so keep that in mind. Long video. I kind of apologize, but not really, because I think this information is really, really important. Submit, commit, positive energy, positive vibes. Believe in yourself, and for the love of God, give some gratitude. It will make you feel better, trust me. I will talk to you guys all very soon. See you guys.